using chemical or tactical nuclear weapons?
Don't. It will change the face of war unlike anything since World War II.
And the consequences of that would be what? What would the U.S. response be?
Do you think I would tell you if I knew exactly what it would be? Of course I'm not going to tell you. It'll be consequential. They'll become more of a pariah in the world than they ever have been, and depending on the extent of what they do will determine what response would occur.
This is what a nuclear war between the US and Russia could look like. Large-scale conventional combat has returned as a result of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The likelihood of nuclear war would increase significantly if the US and Russia got into an air, land, or sea battle directly. More than 3,000 warheads would undoubtedly be used in an all-out nuclear conflict, which would likely result in the deaths of nearly 100 million Americans and Russians. With the bombing of cities and the employment of thermobaric vacuum weapons, Russia's invasion of Ukraine is already among the most destructive and fatal conflicts in recent memory. Experts and common people alike have pondered what may happen if NATO and the. Before we begin, we should note that neither of the scenarios are likely to occur in our lifetimes. Unlike conventional war, a nuclear war is not something that happens out of the blue. Both the United States and Russia believe that a nuclear war is not winnable and should never be fought. Both countries also subscribe to a policy of assured, large-scale conventional combat has returned as a result of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. However, the United States and Russia do not share the same security ties with Ukraine as they do with other NATO members and allies like South Korea and Japan. As a result, no nation is prepared to aggressively defend Ukraine from nuclear-armed Russia out of concern for starting a nuclear conflict. Russia under Putin opted to attack because it believed Ukraine was undefended and exposed. In our scenario, we'll look at a surprise nuclear first strike that leads to all-out war. One country decides it has exhausted all other options and must destroy enemy nuclear forces before it can use them. In our scenario, we'll look at a surprise nuclear first strike that leads to all-out war. One country decides it has exhausted all other options and must destroy enemy nuclear forces before it can use them. Moments later, Russia launches its entire force of 304 land-based ICBMs carrying a total of approximately 1,183 thermonuclear warheads. The ICBMs would target America's nukes, including the 400 ICBM silos sprinkled across the western United States, nuclear bomber bases in Missouri and Louisiana, and missile submarine bases at Kings Bay, Georgia, and Kitsap, Washington. Each location would likely receive a minimum of 2 nukes in case the first weapon fails to detonate. The nuclear surprise attack, known as a first strike, would primarily target America's land-based nuclear arsenal. Montana, Wyoming, and North Dakota would receive at least 800 nuclear strikes between them. Cities like Seattle, uncomfortably close to Joint Base Kitsap, the home of the Pacific Fleet's ballistic missile submarines, would likely take some damage. The strike, known as a counterforce strike, would be concentrated away from major population and industrial centers. Places like New York City, the San Francisco Bay Area, and entire regions of the U.S. would be spared. Such an attack would likely kill no more than 20 million Americans and leave much of the country intact. At this point, the United States could surrender and face an uncertain future, or it could fight back. Fighting back would mean launching what remained of its ICBMs and any bombers that survived, using them to hunt down remaining Russian nuclear weapons. Bombers are particularly useful in this situation, as they could be used to actively hunt down what remained of Russia's ICBMs, particularly those like the SS-27 mounted on 16-wheeled missile transport trucks. The Navy would begin hunting Russian missile submarines, including those that might be parked off the east and west coasts of the U.S., armed with nuclear-tipped cruise missiles. Russia launches the remainder of its nukes, this time with an eye toward destruction of anything that could contribute to the war effort. The strike targets America's remaining military bases, industry, energy, communications, and transportation facilities, practically anything that makes 21st century life worth living. Cities are not targeted as population centers, but buildings, complexes, and other facilities inside them would be destroyed without mercy. The result would be near total devastation with global consequences. An attack on just one city in the US could cause fatalities in the hundreds of thousands and just as many injuries, Tara Drozdenko, director of the Global Security Program at the Union of Concerned Scientists, tells Popular Mechanics. Fires generating soot could block sunlight, possibly for decades, causing global cooling and shortening growing seasons, causing worldwide food insecurity. Even in the event of surprise nuclear attack, an adversary would have to contend with America's fleet of ballistic missile submarines, including USS Kentucky, pictured here. Each carries 20 Trident D5 ballistic missiles with a total of more than 100 thermonuclear warheads. Even in the event of surprise nuclear attack, an adversary would have to contend with America's fleet of ballistic missile submarines, including USS Kentucky, pictured here. Each carries 20 Trident D5 ballistic missiles with a total of more than 100 thermonuclear warheads. Copyright U.S. Navy photo by Mass Communication Specialist First Class Amanda R. Gray. A nuclear war is extremely unlikely. All nuclear powers implicitly operate by the principle of assured destruction. A nuclear attack on them guarantees a devastating response. If China attacks Russia, it can be assured it will suffer a devastating counter-strike. The instinct for survival in all rational human beings causes them to make decisions that steer them away from really horrific outcomes like nuclear war. Russian President Vladimir Putin has indicated that he understands the peril of nuclear weapons. US and Russian leaders understand that a full-scale nuclear war would be a civilization-ending event, Drozdenko explains. That is why just last month, leaders of 5 nuclear weapons states, including the United States and Russia, called the avoidance of war between nuclear powers their foremost responsibilities, and affirmed that a nuclear war cannot be won and must never be fought. In the current situation, lacking a direct US and Russian confrontation, the likelihood of nuclear war is somewhere near zero. Having said that, accidents can happen and disagreements between two seemingly rational parties can and do quickly spiral out of control. Madmen, unbound by reality and a survival instinct, might also choose nuclear war. In any case, all of human civilization would be bound to their choices. The lesson is that as long as nuclear weapons exist, there is a possibility they could be used. Hiroshima after the atomic bombing of August 6, 1945. The 20-kiloton nuclear bomb killed up to 126,000 people. Most Soviet ICBM warheads are in the 800-kiloton range and would cause exponentially more casualties and damage to populated areas. The scenario outlined above is an outlier, but one still within the realm of possibility. In our scenario, both sides are devastated with no winners.